Shot in the head and abandoned, she searched for help and did the unimaginable to survive. She wasn't just any dog. She was a pit bull, a fiercely loyal mother protecting her pups. But in a moment of fear and misunderstanding, her world shattered. Shot in the head and abandoned to her fate, she should have given up. But she didn't. Driven by the need to survive for her babies, this brave mother embarked on a journey of unimaginable courage. What happened next will leave you speechless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us share more stories of hope and resilience like this one with you. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of silence that comes with early mornings in suburbia. The occasional rustle of leaves and distant hum of a car engine were the only sounds. In the corner of an overgrown yard stood Luna, a beautiful gray and white pit bull, her body coiled with tension as she shielded her 3 newborn puppies nestled in the bushes behind her. Luna had been roaming the streets for months, scavenging scraps to survive. She was wary of humans, not because she was aggressive, but because life had taught her that trust often led to betrayal. Yet, in those bushes, she had found her purpose, her tiny, squirming pups who depended on her for everything. That morning, she sensed danger before it arrived. The man appeared out of nowhere, walking briskly down the street with a shotgun slung over his shoulder. Luna's ears perked up, her body stiffening as she positioned herself in front of her puppies. She didn't bark or growl, she simply stood her ground, her eyes locked onto the stranger with quiet determination. But the man saw something different. To him, she was just another pit bull, a threat waiting to happen. He'd heard enough stories of attacks and aggression to fuel his fear. When Luna took a cautious step forward, he panicked. The sound of the gunshot shattered the morning calm. Luna yelped and collapsed, her head hitting the ground with a dull thud. The man froze. His breath caught in his throat as he realized what he'd done. He glanced around, saw no one, and hurried away, leaving Luna bleeding in the dirt. Luna's world was a blur of pain and confusion. Her head throbbed with a searing intensity, and the metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. But somewhere in the haze, she heard the faint whimpers of her puppies. That sound, fragile and desperate, cut through her agony like a lifeline. She tried to lift her head, but the weight of her injury was overwhelming. Her vision swam, and for a moment, she thought about giving up. It would be easier to close her eyes, to let the darkness take her. But then another whimper reached her ears, and something primal surged within her. She couldn't leave them. They needed her. With a Herculean effort, Luna forced herself onto her paws. The pain was excruciating, and blood trickled down her face, but she didn't waver. Her babies were huddled together, their tiny bodies trembling. She licked them gently, her touch reassuring, despite her own fear. Luna knew she couldn't stay. The smell of blood would attract predators, and her weakened state left her vulnerable. She needed help, something she had avoided her entire life. The humans she had encountered had always been cruel or indifferent, but she had no choice now. Her puppies' lives depended on it. The journey began slowly. Luna nudged her puppies toward a makeshift den under a fence, where they would be hidden and relatively safe while she searched for help. It broke her heart to leave them, but she knew she couldn't carry them all in her condition. She licked each one as if promising she would return, and stumbled onto the street. The mid-morning sun beat down on her as she limped through the neighborhood. Each step sent a jolt of pain through her body, but she pressed on, guided by an instinct that refused to let her give up. Her coat, once shiny and sleek, was matted with dirt and blood. The wound on her head throbbed with every movement, and her vision remained blurred, but her determination never wavered. She passed house after house, the smell of food and the distant sound of voices teasing her senses. But no one stopped. Cars drove by, their drivers glancing at her with mild curiosity before continuing on their way. A woman watering her garden frowned and muttered something under her breath, stepping inside as Luna approached. The rejection stung, But Luna didn't stop. Hours passed, and Luna's strength began to fade. Her legs wobbled beneath her, and her breathing grew labored. She found herself in an industrial part of town, where the streets were lined with warehouses, and the air smelled of metal and oil. The area was quiet, almost deserted, and Luna's hope began to dwindle. Then she saw him. A young man was unloading boxes from a van parked near the entrance of a warehouse. He wore a faded t-shirt and jeans, his face streaked with sweat. Luna paused, watching him from a distance. Something about him felt different. He didn't move like the others she'd seen, hurried and dismissive. He took his time, his movements deliberate and calm. Summoning the last of her courage, Luna stepped forward. The man didn't notice her at first, too focused on his task. But when he turned, their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. The man's brow furrowed as he took in her appearance, her trembling body, the blood matted around her head, the desperation in her eyes. He set the box down slowly, his gaze softening. "Hey, girl," he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with concern. "What happened to you?" Luna didn't understand his words, but his tone was soothing. She took another step forward, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. The man crouched, extending a hand. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm not going to hurt you." Luna hesitated, every instinct telling her to run. But then she thought of her puppies, waiting for her under the fence. She couldn't give up now. Gathering the last of her strength, she closed the distance between them and collapsed at his feet. The man acted quickly. He gently examined her wound, his touch careful but firm. "You're hurt bad," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He glanced around, as if expecting someone to intervene, but the street was empty. Without hesitation, he scooped her up, cradling her against his chest. Luna flinched at the sudden movement, but his steady heartbeat beneath her ear calmed her. "You're gonna be okay," he said softly. "I promise." As the man carried her toward the van, Luna's body gave in to exhaustion. But for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found the help she so desperately needed. The van's interior was dim, filled with the scent of old leather and a faint trace of motor oil. Luna lay on a blanket Ethan had hastily spread out, her breathing shallow but steady. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, catching glimpses of the young man driving. Her world was a blur of pain, exhaustion, and fear, but something about his calm voice gave her a faint sense of safety. "Hang on, girl," Ethan murmured, glancing back at her through the rearview mirror. His tone was gentle, but the worry etched on his face was unmistakable. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, silently willing every red light to turn green. Ethan was a 27-year-old mechanic who spent most of his days fixing engines, not rescuing injured dogs. But when Luna had collapsed at his feet outside the warehouse, something inside him had shifted. He couldn't walk away, not when she was so clearly fighting to survive. When they reached the animal clinic, Ethan carried Luna inside, cradling her as if she might shatter. The receptionist looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of the bloodied pit bull. "She's been shot," Ethan said, his voice urgent. "She needs help now." The receptionist sprang into action, summoning a veterinarian. Within moments, a woman with a calm, authoritative presence appeared. Her gray hair was tied back, and her expression was a mix of concern and focus. "Bring her this way," the vet instructed, leading Ethan into an examination room. Ethan gently laid Luna on the metal table, his hand lingering on her side as if reluctant to let go. The vet began her examination, her movements careful yet efficient. Luna whimpered faintly, her body flinching at the unfamiliar touch. "The bullet grazed her skull," the vet said after a moment, her voice grim. "It's a miracle she's alive. But she's lost a lot of blood, and her body is in shock. We need to stabilize her immediately." "Can you save her?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. "We'll do everything we can," the vet replied. But even if she pulls through, she'll need time, care, and a quiet place to heal. Ethan didn't hesitate. She can stay with me. The vet nodded, her eyes softening at his determination. All right, let's get started. The hours dragged on as Luna underwent surgery. Ethan paced the waiting room, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the image of her eyes, those soulful, pleading eyes that had looked at him as if he were her last hope. He thought about his sister Emma, who had once described dogs as angels with fur. Emma had been right, and Ethan wasn't about to let this angel fall. Finally, the vet emerged, her scrubs stained and her face weary, but there was a small smile on her lips. She's stable, the vet said. We removed the bullet fragments and closed the wound. She's not out of the woods yet, but she's got a fighting chance. Relief flooded through Ethan. Thank you, he said, his voice almost a whisper. She's a fighter, the vet added. She's lucky you found her. Luna woke hours later, her body heavy and her head throbbing. The sterile scent of the clinic filled her nose, mingling with the faint aroma of antiseptic. She tried to lift her head, but her strength failed her. Ethan's face appeared in her line of sight, his expression filled with quiet reassurance. Hey, girl, he said softly. You're okay. You made it. She didn't understand his words, but his tone was calming. For the first time in days, Luna let herself relax, her body sinking into the soft blanket beneath her. Ethan brought Luna home the next morning. His apartment was modest but welcoming, with a cozy living room and a corner he had prepared just for her. He'd set up a soft bed, bowls of fresh water and food, and even a few toys he'd picked up on the way back from the clinic. As he carried her inside, Luna's body trembled with exhaustion, but her eyes scanned the space warily. She didn't trust humans. Not yet. But Ethan's steady presence and the warmth of the room made her hesitate. Maybe this was different. Over the next few days, Ethan devoted himself to her care. He followed the vet's instructions meticulously, cleaning her wound, administering her medications, and coaxing her to eat. Luna's recovery was slow, each small improvement a victory, a wag of her tail, a moment of strength as she stood on shaky legs, a soft nuzzle against Ethan's hand. But even as Luna grew stronger, Ethan noticed the way her eyes often drifted to the door. Her ears would perk up at the faintest sound outside, and a soft whimper would escape her throat. It was as if she were waiting for something, or someone. One evening, as Ethan sat on the floor beside Luna, gently stroking her fur, she let out a soft, mournful cry. It was different from her usual whimpers, deeper, filled with longing. "What is it, girl?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle. "What are you trying to tell me?" Luna lifted her head weakly, her eyes locking onto his. In that moment, Ethan understood. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a mother. Somewhere out there, she had left behind her pups. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had been so focused on saving Luna that he hadn't considered what she might have been fighting for. "You have babies?" Ethan said softly. "That's why you came looking for help." Luna gave a faint wag of her tail, as if she understood. Ethan's chest tightened. He couldn't imagine the strength it had taken for her to leave them behind, to seek help, knowing it was her only chance of survival. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't leave Luna's pups out there, not when she had fought so hard to protect them. He loaded her into the van, carefully placing her on the blanket, and set out to retrace her steps. "We'll find them," he promised. "I don't know how, but we will." Luna rested her head on her paws, her eyes watching him intently. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan had become more than her rescuer. He was her partner in this fight. Ethan drove slowly through the quiet streets, the morning sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Luna lay in the back of the van, her eyes alert despite the exhaustion weighing on her. The determination in her gaze was unmistakable. She knew where she needed to go. She just had to show him. Ethan glanced back at her. "All right, girl," he said softly. "Lead the way." He made his way back to the industrial part of town where he'd found her, stopping periodically to let her take in the surroundings. Each time, Luna would lift her head, her nose twitching as she sniffed the air. When they reached a familiar street, she let out a faint bark, her first sound since the clinic. "This is it, huh?" Ethan murmured, pulling over. Ethan opened the van door and helped Luna down, her movements still shaky but determined. She started forward, her steps slow but purposeful. Ethan followed, his heart pounding as he realized how much was at stake. They reached a dilapidated fence at the edge of an abandoned lot. Luna sniffed along its base, her body trembling with urgency. When she reached a small gap in the fence, she stopped and turned to Ethan, letting out a soft whine. "You left them here, didn't you?" Ethan said, crouching to peer through the gap. His stomach twisted at the sight of the overgrown yard, its weeds towering like a jungle. He squeezed through the opening, careful to widen the gap for Luna to follow. The yard was eerily quiet, save for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Luna moved ahead of Ethan, her nose to the ground. Every step seemed to revive her strength, as if the hope of finding her pups was giving her a second wind. Then they heard it, a faint, high-pitched whimper coming from a dense patch of bushes near the back of the lot. Luna froze, her ears perking up. She barked again, louder this time, and the whimpering grew more insistent. Ethan's heart leapt. "They're here," he said, rushing toward the sound. Luna darted ahead, her body moving with a speed and grace that seemed impossible given her condition. When she reached the bushes, she pushed through the branches, and Ethan heard the soft cries of tiny puppies. Ethan knelt beside Luna, carefully parting the bushes to reveal 3 small pit bull puppies, their eyes wide and bodies trembling. They were huddled together, their thin frames evidence of days without proper nourishment. Luna licked them frantically, her whines a mix of relief and apology. The puppies responded instantly, climbing over each other to reach her warmth. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat as he watched the reunion. He couldn't imagine the strength it had taken for Luna to leave them, to risk everything in search of help. And now, against all odds, she had brought them back together. "They're going to be okay," Ethan said, his voice breaking slightly. "You did it, girl." Ethan carried the puppies back to the van, their tiny bodies bundled in a blanket he'd brought along. Luna climbed in after them, curling her body protectively around her babies. For the first time since he'd found her, she seemed at peace, but Ethan knew their journey wasn't over. The puppies were weak, and they needed medical attention. He drove straight to the clinic, where the vet greeted them with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "You found them," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I didn't think it was possible." "Luna found them," Ethan corrected. "I just followed her lead." The vet examined the puppies, her brow furrowing as she checked their vitals. "They're malnourished and dehydrated, but they're fighters, just like their mom. With proper care, they'll make it." The following weeks were a blur of feedings, vet visits, and sleepless nights. Ethan's small apartment transformed into a makeshift nursery, with Luna and her pups taking center stage. The puppies, whom he named Max, Daisy, and Scout, grew stronger with each passing day, their playful energy a stark contrast to the fragile state they'd been in when he found them. Luna, too, began to heal. Her wound, though still a visible reminder of her ordeal, no longer seemed to hinder her. She moved, with confidence, her focus always on her pups. Ethan often caught her watching him, her eyes filled with gratitude that words could never express. One evening, as Ethan sat on the floor playing with the puppies, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find a man standing there, his face pale and his hands trembling. Ethan recognized him instantly, the man who had shot Luna. "What do you want?" Ethan asked, his tone sharp. The man looked down, shame written across his features. "I heard about the dog. I didn't know she had puppies. I didn't know she was just trying to protect them." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And that justifies shooting her?" "No," the man said quickly, his voice cracking. "It doesn't. I was scared, and I acted without thinking. I've regretted it every day since. I wanted to see her, to apologize." Ethan hesitated, his instincts telling him to send the man away. But then he glanced back at Luna, who was watching the exchange from her bed. Her eyes were calm, her expression unyielding. If she could forgive, maybe Ethan could too. "All right," Ethan said, stepping aside, "but don't upset her." The man entered cautiously, his eyes widening as he saw Luna and her pups. He sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I didn't see you for what you were. I see it now." Luna didn't move, but her gaze remained fixed on him. After a long moment, she let out a soft huff and turned her attention back to her pups, as if to say, "I've already moved on." The man left soon after, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his guilt. Ethan watched him go, feeling a strange sense of closure. Luna's journey had come full circle. She had survived the worst humanity had to offer and emerged stronger, her unwavering love for her pups leading her to safety and redemption. As Ethan sat beside Luna that night, watching her pups play, he realized how much she had taught him, about resilience, about forgiveness, and about the incredible strength it takes to fight for the ones you love. The days following the encounter with the man who had shot Luna were a mix of reflection and healing. Ethan couldn't shake the image of the man kneeling in tears, broken by the weight of his guilt. It had been a powerful moment, but it also served as a reminder of how far Luna had come. Luna, now a picture of resilience, seemed to have moved on from the trauma. Her focus remained solely on her puppies, Max, Daisy, and Scout. The once fragile pups now bounded across the apartment with uncontainable energy, filling the small space with life and joy. Luna watched over them with a quiet strength, her nurturing instincts unwavering. Ethan, too, had changed. Caring for Luna and her pups had transformed him in ways he hadn't expected. His days, once dominated by work and routine, were now filled with purpose. Each wag of a tail, each playful bark, was a reminder of the beauty in second chances. One quiet evening, Ethan sat on the floor, surrounded by Luna and her pups. Max was attempting to chew on his shoelaces while Daisy and Scout wrestled nearby. Luna lay a few feet away, her watchful eyes never leaving her babies. "You're a good mom," Ethan said softly, glancing at her. Luna tilted her head slightly as if understanding. He smiled and continued, "I don't know how you did it. Surviving that, finding me, leading me back to them. You're incredible." Luna stretched out, resting her head on her paws, her tail wagging faintly. Ethan chuckled, feeling a warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about Luna or the pups anymore. It was about the bond they had all built together. Just as life seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm, a new challenge emerged. Ethan received a call from his landlord, who had been tipped off about the number of dogs in his apartment. "You can't keep all of them here, Ethan," the landlord said bluntly. "It's against the lease agreement. You'll have to figure something out." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. The thought of separating Luna from her pups, or even parting with any of them, was unbearable. They had become a family, and the idea of breaking that bond felt cruel. "I'll figure it out," Ethan said, his voice tight. But the truth was, he had no idea how to handle the situation. Ethan spent the next few days exploring every option. He looked into renting a larger home where he could legally keep all 4 dogs, but the costs were overwhelming. He reached out to friends and family, hoping someone might be able to help, but no one was in a position to take in the dogs. As the days passed, Ethan grew increasingly anxious. Luna seemed to sense his stress, often resting her head on his knee as if to reassure him. Her quiet support gave him strength, but the looming decision weighed heavily on his mind. A week later, the man returned. Ethan saw him through the window, standing nervously on the sidewalk outside the apartment building. His shoulders were hunched, and his hands were stuffed into his pockets, as if he were debating whether to knock. Ethan opened the door before he could decide. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone guarded. The man looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and determination. I brought something," he said, holding up a bag filled with toys, treats, and food. "It's for her and the pups. It's the least I can do." Ethan hesitated, his instincts telling him to send the man away. But then he glanced back at Luna, who had wandered to the doorway. She stood there, watching silently, her gaze steady and unyielding. Ethan sighed and stepped aside. "Come in." The man entered cautiously, his eyes darting to Luna and the pups. He set the bag down and knelt on the floor, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm so sorry," he said again, his voice cracking. "I can't take back what I did, but I want to make it right. Please tell me how I can help." Ethan crossed his arms, his jaw tight. "You can't undo it, but maybe you can learn from it. Understand that dogs like Luna aren't what you think they are. They're not monsters." The man nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know that now. She didn't deserve what I did to her." Luna, to Ethan's surprise, stepped forward. She sniffed the man cautiously, her body language calm but alert. After a moment, she licked his hand once before retreating to her pups. The man let out a shaky breath, his shoulders sagging in relief. "She forgives you," Ethan said quietly, "but don't mistake that for permission to hurt again." "I won't," the man promised. "Thank you." Over time, the man's actions proved his sincerity. He began volunteering at a local animal shelter, learning about dogs and working to change the misconceptions he'd once held. He even visited Ethan occasionally, bringing supplies for Luna and the pups and asking about their progress. For Ethan, it was a reminder that redemption was possible, that people, like dogs, could change if given the chance. He still struggled with his own feelings, but watching the man's efforts helped soften the anger he carried. Luna, meanwhile, thrived. Her pups grew into healthy, energetic little bundles of joy, each one a testament to her determination and love. Ethan decided to keep Scout, the smallest and most timid of the litter, while finding loving homes for Max and Daisy through trusted friends. Months passed, and Luna's life became a far cry from the struggle she had endured. She was no longer a dog fighting to survive on the streets. She was part of a family, surrounded by love and safety. Her bond with Ethan was unbreakable, forged in the fires of their shared journey. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Ethan sat on the porch with Luna and Scout by his side. He stroked Luna's head, his thoughts drifting to everything they had been through. "You're incredible, you know that?" he said softly. "You've taught me more than I ever thought I could learn." Luna looked up at him, her eyes filled with the quiet wisdom that had carried her through so much. She nudged his hand with her nose, her way of saying, "You're part of this too." The transition from survival to stability had been gradual but profound for Luna and her small family. Ethan's home was no longer just a shelter. It had become a sanctuary. Luna thrived in the warmth of his care, and her puppies, now healthy and full of life, brought endless joy to the little household. Scout, the runt of the litter, had formed an especially close bond with Ethan, following him around the house with unwavering loyalty. But life's challenges weren't entirely behind them. The journey had left scars, both visible and hidden, and Ethan was about to discover just how much Luna's past still lingered in her heart. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan decided to take Luna and Scout to a nearby park. It was Scout's first time venturing beyond the apartment, and his excitement was palpable. The little pup's tail wagged furiously as he trotted beside Luna, who walked with her usual calm, protective demeanor. The park was bustling with activity, families playing catch, joggers weaving along the paths, and other dogs barking and running in the open field. Ethan kept a close eye on Luna, knowing she wasn't yet used to such crowded environments. As they walked, a man with a large, boisterous dog approached. The other dog lunged playfully toward Luna, barking loudly. Though the interaction was harmless, Luna froze, her body stiffening as memories of her past dangers seemed to flood back. She let out a low growl, stepping protectively in front of Scout. Ethan knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her head. "It's okay, girl," he said softly. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." The man apologized, pulling his dog away, and the moment passed. But Ethan couldn't shake the weight of what he'd seen. Luna's scars ran deeper than he'd realized, and while her physical wounds had healed, her trust in the world still needed time. Scout, on the other hand, was fearless. The little pup's confidence grew with each passing day, and his playful energy was infectious. Ethan often found himself laughing at Scout's antics, chasing his tail, pouncing on toys twice his size, and occasionally trying to help Ethan with repairs in the garage. One evening, as Ethan worked on an old motorcycle, Scout sat nearby, chewing on a wrench. Luna watched from her bed, her eyes half closed in contentment. The scene was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past, but Scout's bravery wasn't just amusing, it was also inspiring. He had a way of coaxing Luna out of her shell, encouraging her to play and explore in ways she hadn't before. Ethan often marveled at how the tiny pup seemed to sense what his mother needed, their bond a testament to Luna's unwavering love. Ethan decided to take a bold step in helping Luna move forward. He arranged a visit to an animal rehabilitation center that specialized in working with dogs who had experienced trauma. The facility was run by an old friend of Ethan's, a behaviorist named Sarah who had a gift for understanding dogs. When they arrived, Luna was cautious but curious. Sarah greeted her gently, crouching to Luna's level and letting her approach on her own terms. "She's been through a lot," Ethan explained. "I just want her to feel safe again." Over the next few weeks, Sarah worked with Luna to rebuild her confidence. They practiced socialization, exposure to different environments, and even some agility exercises to boost her sense of control. Luna was hesitant at first, but with Sarah's patience and Ethan's unwavering support, she began to trust the process. Scout often joined the sessions, his playful energy acting as a bridge between Luna and the unfamiliar surroundings. Slowly but surely, Luna began to relax. She learned to focus on Ethan's voice, drawing strength from his presence, and her fear started to give way to curiosity. As Luna's confidence grew, Ethan decided to reach out to the man who had shot her. It wasn't an easy decision, but he knew forgiveness was part of healing, not just for Luna, but for himself as well. The man, whose name was Tom, was hesitant when Ethan called. "Are you sure you want me to come by?" he asked, his voice heavy with guilt. "I am," Ethan replied. "But this isn't about you. It's about her." When Tom arrived, he brought a bag of treats and toys, his hands trembling as he stood at the door. Luna watched him warily at first, her ears twitching as she studied him. Ethan crouched beside her, speaking softly. "It's okay, girl. He's here to make things right." Tom knelt down, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't see you for what you are. I only saw what I thought you might be." Luna stepped forward cautiously, sniffing his outstretched hand. After a moment, she licked it once before retreating to sit beside Ethan. It wasn't an embrace, but it was enough. Tom's eyes filled with tears as he nodded. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a chance." The visit marked a turning point for everyone. For Luna, it was another step toward reclaiming her sense of safety. For Ethan, it was a reminder of the power of compassion and second chances. And for Tom, it was an opportunity to begin making amends, not just to Luna, but to all the dogs he had once feared. As the weeks passed, Luna's transformation continued. She no longer flinched at loud noises or strange dogs, and her playful side began to shine. She chased Scout around the yard, wagged her tail when Ethan came home, and even began to approach strangers with cautious curiosity. Ethan watched her with pride, knowing how far she had come. Luna wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. One evening as the sun set over the city, Ethan sat on the porch with Luna and Scout by his side. The air was crisp, and the sky was painted in hues of orange and pink. Ethan stroked Luna's head, his thoughts drifting to the journey they had shared. "You're incredible. You know that?" he said softly. "You've taught me more about strength and love than I ever thought possible." Luna leaned into his touch, her eyes filled with the quiet wisdom that had carried her through so much. Scout, ever the energetic pup, bounded up to Ethan's lap, earning a laugh as he licked Ethan's face. The three of them sat there, a picture of resilience and love. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every struggle, every tear, and every moment of doubt. The days of uncertainty and fear were far behind Luna and her little family. Her journey from near death to safety had not only changed her life, but also left a lasting impact on those around her. Ethan's once quiet apartment had become a hub of warmth and love, where Luna and Scout thrived as cherished members of his family. Yet, the story wasn't over. There was still more to give, more to inspire. One crisp morning, Ethan received a call from Sarah, the behaviorist who had helped Luna during her rehabilitation. Her voice was tinged with excitement. "Ethan, there's something you should know," Sarah began. "I shared Luna's story with a local animal rescue organization, and they want to feature her in a campaign. They think her journey could inspire people to reconsider how they view pit bulls." Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, a smile forming. "That's incredible. Luna's story deserves to be told." The rescue group planned to launch a series of videos and articles highlighting Luna's resilience and her role as a loving mother. Ethan agreed to participate, knowing this was an opportunity to change minds and show the world what pit bulls were truly capable of. The first filming session took place at the park, where Luna and Scout had begun their socialization training. Ethan watched as Luna walked confidently alongside Scout, her demeanor calm and composed. The camera crew marveled at her transformation, capturing footage of her playing fetch, cuddling with Ethan, and watching over Scout like the devoted mother she was. During an interview, Ethan shared the pivotal moments of their journey, how he had found Luna, the surgery that saved her life, and the reunion with her pups. His voice cracked as he recounted the sheer determination she had shown, even when the odds were stacked against her. "Luna taught me what it means to fight for what matters," he said, his gaze drifting to where she lay in the grass, her tail wagging as Scout climbed over her. "She didn't give up on her pups, and she didn't give up on life. That kind of strength is something we can all learn from." The campaign went live a few weeks later, and the response was overwhelming. Luna's story spread across social media, reaching people from all walks of life. Messages poured in from viewers who were moved by her courage, many of whom admitted they had previously feared or misunderstood pit bulls. "I was wrong about these dogs," one comment read. "Luna's story opened my eyes. She's a hero." Inspired by the outpouring of support, Ethan decided to do more. He began volunteering at the animal shelter, where Tom, the man who had shot Luna, now worked. Together, they focused on educating the community about responsible pet ownership and the true nature of pit bulls. Luna often joined Ethan during these visits, her calm presence helping to soothe nervous dogs and skeptical visitors. Scout, ever the playful pup, became a favorite among the shelter staff, his antics bringing smiles to everyone's faces. One day, a young boy approached Luna hesitantly, his parents watching from a distance. Ethan knelt beside the boy, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She's very friendly," Ethan said. "You can pet her if you'd like." The boy reached out tentatively, his small hand brushing against Luna's fur. Her tail thumped against the floor, and she licked his hand softly. The boy giggled, his fear melting away. "She's amazing," the boy said, looking up at Ethan. "I didn't know dogs like her could be so nice." Ethan smiled. "She is. And there are so many more like her, just waiting for someone to see them for who they really are." Months later, Ethan received an invitation to speak at a local fundraiser for animal rescue organizations. The event was held in a spacious auditorium, with Luna by his side as he addressed the crowd. "Luna's story isn't just about survival," Ethan said, his voice steady but emotional. "It's about the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances. She taught me, and so many others, that strength doesn't come from how big or tough you are. It comes from your heart." The audience erupted in applause as Luna wagged her tail, seemingly understanding that the cheers were for her. Ethan glanced down at her, his chest swelling with pride. After the event, a woman approached Ethan with tears in her eyes. "I was always afraid of pit bulls," she admitted, "but after hearing Luna's story, I see how wrong I was. Thank you for sharing her with us." As life settled into a new rhythm, Ethan often reflected on the journey that had brought Luna into his life. She had transformed not only his perception of pit bulls, but also his understanding of resilience and love. Scout, now a full-grown dog with boundless energy, remained a constant reminder of the life Luna had fought so hard to protect. Ethan's small family continued to grow as he fostered and eventually adopted another rescue dog, a timid beagle mix who had been abandoned at the shelter. Luna took the new addition under her wing, her nurturing instincts extending beyond her own pups. Years later, Luna's story continued to inspire. The rescue campaign had grown into a national movement, with countless pit bulls finding loving homes as a result. Ethan often received letters from adopters, thanking him for sharing Luna's journey and giving them the courage to open their hearts to these misunderstood dogs. One evening, as Ethan sat on the porch with Luna and Scout by his side, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. The stars above twinkled softly, and the night air was filled with the hum of crickets. "You've changed so much, Luna," he said, stroking her head gently. "But the truth is, you've changed me even more." Luna leaned against him, her eyes closing in contentment. She was no longer the scared, wounded dog he had found on that fateful day. She was a survivor, a symbol of hope, and a reminder that even the darkest moments could lead to something beautiful. What would you do if life gave you a second chance to make a difference? If Luna's story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in the power of hope and transformation. Together, we can help more dogs like Luna find their way home.